Hello, everyone. Today is December 15th, and this is etcd community meeting. On our first topic is ARM. Siva Kumar, can you start? Can you discuss what you want to?
Sure. Thanks for this opportunity, Marek. So I had started a conversation in the HCD dev channel a while ago around how currently the HCD project currently doesn't support ARM at tier 1 level. I think when initially I asked this question, it was at tier 2, and then later it was downgraded to tier 3, right? That's primarily because I think we are not testing ARM in a big way. But recently, we have various cloud providers provide, ARM offerings, in compute, and a lot of people are, either using it, especially when deploying HCD clusters on their own, or probably deploying Kubernetes on their own. They're using HCD on ARM in some form or the other. There are also hobbyists who use ARM, in a big way, as part of Raspberry Pi deployments, and they also use HCD that way. So I was just curious, if the HCD community is interested in ensuring that we provide higher tier level support for ARM, and just wanted to gauge the interest in the community, especially among maintainers, about our support for ARM. So I started a conversation earlier. Marek had responded to it. So he did point to how Gyohu, one of the earlier committers, had supported, had a self-hosted GitHub Action Runner, which sort of ensured ARM conformance, and I think that's why it was at tier 2. And recently, I think we don't have that, and therefore that's why we've downgraded to tier 3. But I was just curious if is there any other blocks in terms of like supporting ARM, if it's just a question on getting hardware from Equinix via CNCF Labs and running these GitHub actions on them, would that suffice? Are there any other concerns around ARM support?
Okay. I can tag the topic as I responded first. I think the main, from maintainer part, the main concern would be the previous history. I think there were the runners were brought down not for it was not random or not someone just didn't leave. The reason was security. I think there was some risk of those runners being abused. I don't know full history. I would definitely the moment that you would propose, I would need to research want to go back and research. Unfortunately, it's hard to get Guho back or talk to him. So I would need to I would look into the original issue that disabled the runner and look if we are covering the same risks, and but if we are, that should be good. I think there's some improvement. I think there was a lot of improvement on CNCF side with providing the runners first. We got the runners. We are not using them, enterprise runners. So we have more support on different ways that we can run tests. It's just not used. I think there are also multiple platforms. So I think I would need to. I don't know.
I think one question I had was so ARM means a lot of things, right? So not all ISAs are the same. So what does ARM really mean in that case then? Because even if you have a runner of some kind, you still won't be able to cover all the ARM cases, right? There's the Graviton, then probably there's CM1, then I'm not even sure how many there are, but it'd be difficult to kind of bring first class coverage to all these different ISAs.
Right. That's a good question, Vivek. But before I answer that question, let me just, go back to Marek's earlier comment, right? So, Marek, when you did respond about Gyohu's initial, self-hosted GitHub Action Runner using, I think he had his own, again, this is based on my, just browsing through the commits in the HCD repo, right? So it looks like he had his own AWS Graviton HCD runner, right? And it was a self-hosted GitHub Action runner, and that's how I think the whole thing was certified. And so when you talked about like security and abuse potential of those ARM runners, I wasn't exactly clear on what it was, and then I was trying to go through the commit, which sort of reverted that support level as well, and there was not a lot of background around it. So yeah, if there's any other maintainer who knows the background, I would really be interested in hearing why we removed that. But now going back to Vivek's point, yeah, Vivek, that's a very interesting point. So today, again, I really don't know the answer to that question, right? So today, if we use the CNCF lab and we pick a standard Ampere-based ARM bare metal machine, which Equinix provides for CNCF labs, then that's what we would really certify against, right? So I don't think the HCD community has anything beyond the Equinix CNCF lab machines to test these kinds of support levels conformance. And so we cannot test all ARM machines, ARM hardware, but we can probably test most representative of them, which is used for server class of machines, right? Like Ampere and Graviton and those kinds of use cases. I think they all align with standard ARM architectures. So I assume that would suffice, but I would really love to hear from the community if they think otherwise.
Yeah, or maybe like we can be really clear on like what we're trying to exactly cover, and this is what we've tested on. So maybe that is also one way to fix this. So yeah, I was just pointing out like there's just a lot of stuff, and I was just trying to make sure that we're on the same page. Makes sense.
True. But today, does HCD have any specific ambitions around like supporting embedded kind of use cases like SOC, ARM SOC kind of use cases? If so, then your question is very valid, right? We should also look at when we claim we certify ARM, we should also support other kinds of hardware profiles. But if it's just server kind of workloads, which I assumed ARM HCDs were mostly used for, I thought just supporting the Equinix bare metal shapes would suffice. But I would really love to hear from others as well. Yeah.
So
one question to you, Marek, if I can. So you did last, in the HCD dev conversation, you talked about how there was security and like abuse concerns with the earlier approach, right? So do you think those concerns would be applicable when we start moving to the CNCF lab-based runners?
I think no. I think no. Like, I would need to check and find. I assume if this is either shared runners or runners that are maintained by CNCF, it should not be like a problem. So it's more about maintaining like the same cost of maintenance. Like if we can depend on a CNCF, it should be. It's just about someone looking at the test results and making sure that to fix ARM issues.
Okay, got it. So I was just reading through the chat comments by Josh as well. So I think again that's the same thing Josh is also trying to highlight, right? So assuming we run all these test cases and they all pass, do maintainers need additional confidence, in terms of supporting bugs on ARM, right? Like, do we expect, additional complexity, additional workloads when it needs to support, a different hardware architecture like ARM, like based on your earlier history with AMD and Intel, like, did you guys see any hardware-specific issues, workloads with respect to supporting different architecture types? Sorry, go ahead.
I cannot comment on this because I think the last time we ran non-x60 or x64 tests was over 2 years ago. So I cannot comment the history, like the time before I joined the project. the main thing is that based on Windows support, everyone wants, like, there is, when people from Kubernetes coming, everyone wants support Windows to be supported as a development environment. No one wants to put the work. So, and no one of the maintainers uses Windows. So it's chicken and egg problem of we cannot, no new contributors can join the project because they cannot, will not figure out by themselves how to fix some issues. I expect.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think ARM.
Yeah.
I think ARM would be easier though if somebody volunteered, right?
Yeah.
I mean we need for ARM
that
we need somebody who says, "Hey, when the tests fail, I'm going to do something about it."
Yeah, I think it's when someone pushes the wagon and we get something working and automated, and we have it just gets once enough trust that we can make it a merge, testing on merge. I think at that point I mean, it's question of scale if we will have enough runners and to test every PR. But at that point, it will be much easier to just block PRs that resulted in problems with other distro in other architectures. Of course, for release, we would need to maybe document the release that we would need more qualification to guarantee the release.
Okay. So, but today, the document which you're just sharing, right? So that clearly articulates what does tier 1 mean, right? So it means build passes, unit test pass, integration test pass, functional and performance test passes. So assuming like ARM clears all that, would we still have reservations on calling it tier 1? Primarily because we don't have like maintainers supporting it. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that a fair way to
I mean, I don't think there will be an issue. It will be just a huge risk, because at the moment that it will start blocking our release process. I mean, hypothetically, we could say we support it because it's well tested, but we cannot and we have a one release, like let's say 3.6 goes there. But at the moment that we lose the person that maintained for 3.6 and fix everything left, and we cannot release 3.7, that would be a point that we either would be asking heavily for help or need to cut again, because what happened with technically for 3.5 or 3.4 we had more support or for support for ARM, but we need to remove it because we are no longer testing it and we cannot no longer test. So at that point we would need to again ask for help to get the support. I don't know if we can get to that, but there is a risk, but I don't think it will materialize, and it's a long time before, like it's pretty much in the future. So, I mean, as long as there is no big impact on the project that we need to do a workaround for ARM, I think it's not a problem to integrate.
Okay.
Yeah,
so, I hear you. I completely understand what you're saying. Yep, it adds an additional risk, and unless we build the confidence, and the muscle around supporting, this new architecture, I think it's an additional risk. So one of the things we've been trying to do is like try to run the current GitHub Actions, which we use for our release process against our own hardware, right? And at least all the tests currently are passing, but we still want to try it with different scenarios and ensure that it works well before we start submitting a PR for that. But yeah, like, so in principle, at least you do agree that it might make sense to start requesting hardware from the CNCF lab and then at least start bringing it into the pipeline so that at some point in time we can then bring it up into the release, right?
I mean, if you have working PR, or I mean, if you tested it locally, and that, I don't expect big change. I mean, there's I mean, PR should be just like adding another job. It should be, we can restart. Yeah, we can request the hardware. I don't see an issue.
Perfect. Cool. Thanks, Marek and Josh and Vivek. I think this was a great conversation. Vikas also is from my team. So Vikas, do you have anything else you wanted to ask?
Yeah, Shiva, just a quick question to the team. So I just heard that we may be okay to call it tier one, but then it will add additional risk. If ARM breaks in any of the versions. So what does the community think about mitigating that risk? What would be the criteria to really say we have covered this risk? Is it only in terms of the maintainer bandwidth, or are we looking at anything else to be supported with?
I think like my understanding is just maintainer band. I mean, not maintainer bandwidth. It's like you cannot ask. I mean, it's hard to ask someone that doesn't have any ARM hardware, never worked with ARM hardware, to fix an issue if it happens. We at that point we would. I mean, depending on how committed we are in maintain, like we could ask. We only think that at that point we need to ask a maintainer. So minimum in previous cases, if you look at the older versions, there was a dedicated, like a new person joining, like you can, it should be an easy path for a new maintainer or for someone to becoming a new maintainer just for release. Like, I mean, at some point, I think we cleaned up all the previous maintainers, but I think 3.3 maybe, I don't know. So at some point, like I think there were people that directly assigned to this, but they left the project. I think I cleaned up.
Got it. It makes sense. One quick follow-up on that. So suppose a ARM maintainer joins, still we need to build confidence. So is there a time frame where we would want to watch it and see everything is working for last 2 months or 3 months, and now we are confident to call it tier 2 or tier 1, or how does it?
I expect we can add it as part of CI, but non-required to pass. So basically, don't block PRs and run run both architectures. And at that moment, we have like the confidence would be tests are passing the same, or all the tests are, or flakiness is less than on same or than on x64 that or 86 that we are good. So it's just, I mean, yeah, there is a problem that we don't even on x86 have enough confidence on, because there is high flakiness on some scenarios, but I think it should, like, I think that would be the best way. The risk here I expect is test flakiness, because at this moment we run, I don't know, 10 or 20 different, 10, let's say 10 different tests in parallel, and we get around 30% flakiness. So running or doubling number of scenarios that we run with ARM could lead to, or will lead to, increased flakiness. So I would say the risk would be that at that moment there will be a risk to make it on merge. Maybe running unit tests should be like going to tier. Yeah, I think we would only need to run periodic and think about what we can do with pre-submits, because that would be the risk, current flakiness. The problem is integration test and end-to-end tests are pretty, like, have pretty high flakiness still.
Sure. And I mean, we really are keen to support ARM. And if we have to kind of get back to you after we get back from the holidays, is there some point of contact we could work with? We could use the Slack channel, and we want to just understand how we can help the community to get ARM to a tier 2 and then tier 1 support level. So is there a point of contact from the community that we can work with? We can maybe work on Slack, and I think monthly meeting may maybe kind of not the right platform if you have to engage much closer.
I mean, the best approach is having a umbrella bag that like basically we want to deliver at some the issue to or ARM to this tier, and having a list of tasks that need to be done and going through them and having this one source of communication. If you need more direct than Slack, then I can call the maintainers, and we officially used Kubernetes Slacks because everyone is on from etcd maintainers is on there. So you can ping the etcd if you need direct help, but I think most issues is best to be resolved for future, or to have it on GitHub issues.
No, I know we already had a long conversation. One last question from my side. So as you said, we already have a list of tasks for tier 2, what all needs to be done in this page. For tier 1, what needs to be done. And in addition, we need to watch the CI and also think about having some maintainer who should be available to support ARM. So I'm just seeing this as the task list for now. So we can just track it somewhere, and we can then engage offline on how we can make it happen. And then, as you said, we can just march towards that goal. Will that be a good approach?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. Sounds good. Thank you. Thank you, Shiva. That's all I had.
So just a couple of responses to the questions in chat. So Josh, your comment on performance being fundamentally different between different architectures, that's absolutely valid, right? So I was going through the existing etcd tests. So this is really a question for Marek and others, right? So what kind of performance tests do we need to clear before we certify tier 2 and tier 1? Like currently we have stress tests. Currently, I didn't see any specific performance regression tests, but I was just curious. Do we have any?
So does it mention stress test? I don't know what this is, not well defined. What this means stress test?
Okay.
There is no high definition. I think there was there's some goals of stress testing that are someone mentioned in documentation, but we don't run them.
Okay.
I don't think. I mean, we somewhat replaced them, but the main thing, I think functional tests are also don't require a lot of load. There is now new set of tests, but yeah, they don't do any traffic. The main thing that we do currently for new releases is using Kubernetes scalability tests. So basically, I think just after the release, before announcement, when we have images, I think with release candidates, we send them to Kubernetes scalability team, and they run 5,000 node tests. It's hard to get. I mean, it's pretty beefy tests. So and they would immediately, we are doing it because they would immediately notice if there is any regression. Other side is, I know, showing them. I mean, it's hard to compare. It's hard to compare performance of those platforms. So
absolutely, yep. Yeah, I don't think we can definitely, at least during the first release, when we have ARM support, we can clearly say that, this is the performance versus x64. But generally, I was just curious about, like, once we release ARM support, how do we track performance regression over time, right? So that's where I was curious whether we do the same for x64, and do we want to carry it over to ARM as well? It looks like we only have scalability testing, right, Marek? Based on what you just shared.
Currently, yes. There is no dedicated etcd regression tests.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Okay.
If we get it into the Kubernetes testing, Kubernetes actually has a bunch of performance tests, but they're not primarily looking, they're not necessarily looking directly at etcd performance. It's going to be Kubernetes API performance, and there's several layers to that.
Sure. Interesting. Okay. And then I just wanted to respond to Bogdan's question about running Cube on ARM, right? So yeah, Bogdan, that's definitely one of the use cases we are looking at. But generally, we just wanted a key value store on ARM, and etcd seems to be a very popular choice. And so we were looking at not only Cube but non-Cube workloads also on ARM using etcd. So that's all we had, Marek. Thanks a lot for this conversation, Marek, Josh, and Vivek, and Bogdan. This is great. As Vika said, probably after the holidays, we'll definitely reach out to the community, try to move this forward along with your help.
Great to hear that. Okay, we have 2 minutes. If there's other topics, I can just quickly mention that we had, I think since last meeting, we had the release that I mentioned. We cut 3.5.6. It solved 2 data inconsistency issues that we detected in etcd. Hopefully, one of the issues we detected using a new testing framework. So hopefully, we should be able to find all the remaining, use the same approach to find all the remaining issues. So there is a lot of hope for to invest there. Yeah, there was hands up.
Oh yeah, quick question. So, what will be the end of life for 3.4?
So our current release maintenance is just based on number of release candidates or release managers. So historically, we maintained only 2 releases. So technically, when 3.6 is released, with the current 3.4 release maintainer should move to maintaining 3.6. I don't. So we cannot give the dates. I think the first plan to release 3.6 was at the beginning of the year, but based on our current state of testing and stability, we haven't even touched any feature work that would motivate the release. So I don't think we are any close to 3.6. So I think 3.4 will be maintained until we really stabilize 3.5.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, so I think that's all from me. If there are no other questions, we can finish for today. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining, and hope to see you.
Happy holidays, everybody.
Yeah, happy holidays. Yeah. Hope to see you in the new year.